All right. All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Kwan, the founder of Cannabis Marketing, the number one marketing agency in the world for cannabis dispensaries, both in Canada and the United States. And I'm joined here with Adam Schlett, one of the co-founders of SafeReach. So Adam, thank you very much for hopping on the show and, welcome.
Cocky introduction, man. Thank you so much for having me. No, it was really nice to connect, and we got into it pretty quickly with the usual X's and O's of Canna marketing. So excited to kind of dive into it here and share with everybody.
Right, I'm super pumped. So let's start off with this. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about SafeReach.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I fell in my second job with now what I'll consider my mentor in the data and marketing space. I was the first non-partnered employee and helped grow that business to around 150 people. So I've been in the entrepreneurial, that was over a period of about 8 to 9 years. My business partner now and I were met at that company, and I ran sales and he ran account management and biz dev and account management. And we kind of saw an opportunity in cannabis to spin off and take what we had learned there, but maybe kind of evolve the business and go on ourselves. So SafeReach is a media services business for the dispensary cannabis brand space. We work with dispensaries in deploying compliant advertising campaigns. The ability to buy media online for cannabis 2 years ago was like, oh my God, how do you do that? Now it's a little bit more commonplace. So it's not a secret. There are ad platforms out there that are cannabis friendly. The difference for us is the ability to measure attribution and the impact of online ad engagement to sales online and in store. And that's really what differentiates us. It's taking the guesswork out of what the heck did my marketing dollars do for us, and building a bunch of technology to support answering that question, which is relevant in pretty much any business that spends money on advertising.
Right. So put an X amount of dollars, advertiser hopefully gets more out of that, right? That's pretty much the game, right?
That's pretty much the conversation we have with every client we work with, yes.
Right. So did you always know you wanted to get into the cannabis space? Because I know you had the other media agency sort of before. Was this a vertical you were always interested in, or did you just kind of see the opportunity in terms of like, hey, there's a service that we can offer and a lot of people need this solution? That's kind of where we want to go.
I've been an everyday consumer since I was 18. So right. At 34 now, I definitely consider myself a lover of the plant. It was an industry I wanted to be involved in because how many new industries that are not new but are new formed and are billion-dollar industries that you also have an affinity toward and appreciation of.
Right.
That doesn't happen all the time. So it's how do I apply my skill sets and my resources into this industry I love? Mm-hmm. That was really my initial impetus for thinking about cannabis, and just the red tape around cannabis marketing and the fact that I had a background in real data-based marketing. It was just like, this is what you should be doing.
Right. So how did the business itself get started? I know you said, you had your partner, that kind of grew organically, you're in sales and that stuff, but what was kind of like the seed that kind of, grew into this business that you have today?
We have another media agency as well that deals with non-regulated industries, which definitely helped us kind of fail forward in finding our place and how we actually have a business, which, makes a profit and pay people and scale and grow. But we started as an ad exchange trying to solve the publisher problem. Hey, there's nowhere to run ads for cannabis. We realized that secretly a lot of the major exchanges were doing that. So it was like, okay, well, that's not our business. Then we tried to get involved in the data monetization space. Hey, other brands want to reach known cannabis consumers. That's a privacy questionable space at times and a very cash intensive one.
Right.
And we realized this wasn't a fit for us. And every one of our clients that we were talking about, providing either publisher solutions or, data analysis solutions or monetization solutions to, was like, hey, we need help running our traffic. We need traffic and we need to be able to measure it.
Right.
And kind of just our skill sets aligned with what people were asking for. And I was just like, hey, this is the business. Mm-hmm. This is what we're doing. And We started with a few small clients. A few of our key clients now gave us opportunities that, I had to go out and sell them. I had to go,
Right.
knock the doors and make things happen.
Right.
But we've been really lucky with a lot of great clients who have been with us for well over a year, which in marketing is just insane for most people.
Yeah.
For well over a couple of years now at this point, and have grown it brick by brick from there. We haven't taken any outside money, which has sometimes presented challenges in growth. But having the other agency hedged a lot of that early days failing, candidly,
Right.
and has, the last 2 years, the wind's been a little bit more in our sail and building an actual business that grows regularly and has sound business mechanics.
Right. So you kind of touched on it. You're talking about the failures and stuff like that, right? Because I think a lot of, just in general in an entrepreneurship space, they kind of paint a picture of, I did this, this, and this, and now we're making X amount of money. It's like all good. I'm curious as to someone or a company that's offering kind of a new service to essentially a new industry. What were kind of those biggest challenges like that you faced when, I guess, starting out, when there was no blueprint to make things successful, or you had no past experience to be like, oh, we can just do this. This worked for another company.
I think, there's technical answers to that question. The reality is that nobody was on Shopify or WooCommerce. Right. So any of the e-commerce functionality that anybody was used to, it's even just being able to place a retargeting pixel, right? Basic marketing shit wasn't supported by Dutchie, Jane. We've had the benefit of working with them. Right. And helping build these features, which have now been deployed and are used by a lot of our peers. Slight humble brag, one of my partners really helped orchestrate the deployment of a lot of how all that's done. Right. So like solving a lot of the questions, particularly in the attribution world. Hey, you spent $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. What did I get out of it? That framework didn't exist. So on top of a new industry and having to convince people that this solution works and isn't you're in the digital marketing space. There's a lot of snake oil sellers, and I think most clients have been burned by somebody who's not a real operator. Right. We just didn't have the technical tools to offer the solutions that business owners and decision makers rightfully wanted. So they had to be created while also making a new market at the same time. And then also dealing with the realities that dispensary budgets for marketing are small compared to other industries. They want to compare display marketing performance to like SEM marketing performance or Instagram marketing performance. And these things are not necessarily equivalent. So I think all of those challenges, while figuring out how to solve the technical problems, solve the business problems, solve the analytics and insights problems with a team of 4 people, was sometimes fun and really rewarding, and sometimes not so much so.
Right. Are you finding that education kind of gap is still a big piece in like trying to like sell the client and close the client, or has the market kind of caught up to kind of what you're doing right now?
A little bit of both, to be honest. I'd say a fraction of the market's caught up. A fraction of the market started hiring people from the real ad tech technology space who have in the front of the house people. I'm not talking about engineers who have pretty much a working understanding how a lot of these systems work, because it's not overly complicated technology. Right. The decision makers, I think, are getting a little more in tuned. I think a lot of people have been burned by folks who didn't have a prowess in some of these solutions that we offer. But the reality is they're coming to us, and many times they're paying for the media, but they're paying for our execution, analysis, and insights into why we're justifying doing what we're doing. So I don't say we're an ad agency, because agencies do web dev, creative, and media placement. We're a media company that does media and attribution analytics, and there's a nuance there. But
a big nuance.
Yes, very much so. I think we're still a boutique business. We haven't wanted to go and scale hiring because we wanted to grow the right business, and cannabis is tricky right now. I mean, economically, it's what's the first thing to go during all the, like, when things get hard financially, or when the government regulation is asked backwards, making it harder for these operators to go. So we've been just kind of slowly moving our pieces across the chessboard strategically. And you work with us because you want Adam, John, Sarah, Austin, Ardo, our products involved in what you're doing. So that's been the solution to kind of the lack of know-how from the operator or buyer side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, we kind of just met just in the scheme of building our relationships and stuff like that. But that whole thing about kind of like not trying to just grow as big as fast as possible, because like you said, like the majority of my clients came from other marketing agencies who were burned in the past. And they're like, hey, Brandon, company A did A, B, C, D, F, G. I'm like, well, of course, then it just makes my job 10 times harder because I need to now rebuild not only the new trust that they have with me, but I need to remove the distrust they have with marketing agencies or just like kind of service providers as a whole, right? So I appreciate you kind of taking those steps because I do think it's, it plays a huge role in kind of like benefiting us as a whole in terms of just like service professionals and stuff.
Yeah, I think the term we use is consultancy. And even in our non-cannabis business, right? Like where we have Google, social, TikTok, say social, I mean, the meta universe, right? We have all these other awesome tools that are really effective in driving sales. Folks still want to, whether they're $100,000, $500,000 a month or $10,000 a month buyers, like it's not that much of a landslide of difference of competency and understanding some of the technical back, and they still need someone to explain it and make it all work. So I don't know, that's just a huge part of our business. A few of our peers who have scaled very, very quickly, they get backtracked because clients feel like they get left in the lurch because it's hard to find people who know what we do really, really well and provide great service. Like it's a unique skill set.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like service level media attribution, right? Like you do the same thing as however many other companies, but like it's really about the execution of those different things. Like you said, that nuance that really makes a difference on if a campaign is going to go really, really well and if one's not going to go so well. And it's very hard for the buyer to kind of like really decide, okay, this is a company I'm going to go with, or like, this is the other company I'm going to go with, right? So it's a big hurdle for sure.
Yep. We don't have a retail sales team, which, is sometimes keeps me up at night, and where we probably lose some real estate to peers who just have really good sales orgs.
Right.
But we're very focused on scaling the clients we have correctly.
Right.
And then, scaling means, yes, they spend more money with me and my company, but they're doing that because they're seeing measurable results that they can quantify to their bottom line. Right. And I'd rather do that and scale one enterprise real estate brand with 150 stores, starting at 5 stores and getting all 150 than 100 5-store groups that, are difficult to manage and don't necessarily know what they're looking at or have an interest in scaling beyond a test.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I'm the exact same way, so appreciate everything that you guys do. So hopping in, I guess, to the meat and potatoes of like the marketing stuff, because this is probably what you guys really want to listen to. So you've heard me talk about marketing, SEO, organic search, and stuff like that. But I figured, we'd have someone else talk about the marketing strategies that, kind of he thinks. So let's touch on some of the marketing strategies that you think, the retailers could probably best leverage today.
Yeah, and I always start in every meeting with you need to have your SEO tight. You need to have a website that is easily navigable and easy to convert against the menu, right? Like you're a local e-tail business in most cases. We're talking about a brick and mortar retailer that does online reservations, maybe does some localized delivery. You're an e-tail business. Your website is branding as much as it's e-commerce. So those things should be in place first because they're not free, but they're a bit more fixed cost in most cases. And once those are done, you look to amplify that reach because those are all pulling in customers, right? People going into Google saying, I want this now. And you're ranking organically, you're driving into your site, and then you're measuring how many of those folks reach the site and can purchase. And there's standard benchmarks based on how many people are in your market, where you're ranking on the page, et cetera, et cetera. That should be tight first. Once that's tight, then you want to start paying for it, saying, hey, not everyone's necessarily actively searching. How are there other people who are buying in my market who I can identify reach and then drive them to my site and then track that engagement back to my site, back to my menu, or back to an in-store sale. That's where someone like SafeReach comes in and helps play. So the simple way to think about it is programmatic ads, which is display media. In-app, when you're browsing or playing your game, those banner ads that take up the whole screen or a portion of the screen. Web, when you're on Newsweek, CNN, Fox News, whatever side of the aisle you're on, you find them both. Those ads that come up on the side are integrated natively with content that we're tracking users who see the ad for more than 3 seconds and then return to the website within 7 days, or click the ad and return to the website and complete a purchase within 7 days. There are other channels like streaming audio. Spotify and Pandora do not allow cannabis today. CBD kind of, sort of, but most of our business is cannabis centric. So that's really where the focus is. It's a lot of the FM, AM stations in their streaming iterative that support cannabis, because candidly, I think they need the ads. There are some smaller podcast networks that do allow, programmatic insert audio ads. Connected television is the bigger one that's growing. That is really folks who are watching streaming television on Roku, Sling, Samsung TV, Apple TV, certain channels within those networks on their television device or on their mobile phone. The challenge with the last two, audio and CTV, is that they're a little less trackable in terms of ad exposure to sale. And that's principally because of some technical device items. So a majority of the media we see running today for most cannabis operators is programmatic ads, where we're targeting known cannabis enthusiasts, shoppers, buyers within that geographic footprint around their store. And that could be 5, 10, 20 miles, their delivery zone. We want to hit anybody who's waving their hands with a behavior saying, I'm into cannabis. That could be visiting a dispensary and your phone is emitting a latitude and longitude constantly. So there are programs out there that are looking for the latitude and longitude for mobile devices that are associated to the latitude and longitude of a dispensary. If your mobile device is at a dispensary, you're probably buying weed. I want to market to you. If you're reading about cannabis content online, that's called contextual relevance. Hey, I'm on Forbes, but I'm reading an article about Curaleaf and their expansion. That person's, at least they're interested in cannabis. I probably want to sell them cannabis. There are data companies out there that sell cannabis shopper data. I won't name drop any here. Some are good, some suck. So it's using different data tactics to hypothesize that, hey, this person is relevant for this reason and geographically relevant because they're in our radius. And I want to serve them this message and see what it does in terms of driving to my page, browsing my menu, and completing purchases. And that's what we're doing.
So there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, sorry, I told you I'm a long way.
No, that's okay. I've been good. I've been taking the notes. So just going back to the ads and stuff, right? So you answered my question about, the efficacy of like audio ads and visual ads and stuff like that. Are you finding for stores, it's more impactful to have the branded ads, like saying, hey, dispensary near here, or product placement ads, like saying, hey, there's a specific flower that people like? Which one, branding versus product?
I would say the sales answer is all of the above. We typically start with a location convenience call to action, a price call to action, because some people are value shoppers, and then a product call to action. That could be a brand, that could be a product category, rack, flower, edibles. We typically want to test all three of those when we launch a campaign, because they will vary in response by market. We've been seeing more co-branded campaigns. Hey, get Jeter at X and X, get Jeter pre-rolls at X and X dispensary. And some of these brands, particularly regionally, carry a lot of weight. And when it's a great brand and a great offer, people respond.
Because you're essentially piggybacking off of the existing brand efforts that brand did. So why not kind of put, hey, dispensary X company here, and then you leverage the power that they're using.
Yeah, I know most of the data companies, the data analytics companies in cannabis will say brand bias or brand loyalty is low. And who am I to disagree outside of my, micro prism of what I see, but certain brands definitely command a lot of shelf space in certain markets, and the ones who are typically everywhere, definitely do a good job driving engagement online.
Right. And so when you're running any sort of ad, like on like Google or Facebook, right? Typically they would say, hey, run a bunch of ad creative and just let the algorithm do the work and it'll optimize for whatever KPI, right? Is that how you guys do the work, or do you guys manually do it in terms of like, hey, we need to test this, look at the data, test this, or do you just have the almighty algorithm that kind of optimizes for the best thing?
I would say systematically we're set up to deduce what's working and not working. We want to, there are algorithms, optimization algorithms in place that say, hey, optimize spends, clicks, publisher placements that have the highest likelihood of this outcome. Those exist in programmatic just as they do in Google and in Facebook. Right. And then how we proactively feed that process is by saying, hey, we want to have 5 different audiences: geofence, contextual, known shoppers, lookalike shoppers, page retargeting, and we want to take all 3 creatives against each 5 segments and track them separately. Then after a week, we'll say, hey, in these segments, this sucks. In these segments, these kick ass. We're just going to remove these or allocate money here. That's the managed service part of it. So I think it's inherently baked into how we configure campaigns. It is baked into the technology we deploy for our campaigns. And then it's just the principles of being a good marketer.
And how many ad variable, like how many different ad copies are you usually testing at any given period of time?
I would say 3 is the kind of, budgets are slim. It's not like, and creative resources are typically taxed pretty hard. So I wouldn't say, we have a few MSO clients who have scaled creative resources for a lot of retail brands and can pump out creative, not necessarily the standard. So I like to start with 3, and even if we can make 1 ad layout and then alter the copy or just like the products on it, that kind of iteration, that is A/B testing creative. So it's like, how do we get the most with the least amount of work? And that's not to say we don't want to do the work. I'm just saying typically resources are pretty slim. So how do we expand it? And I would say the call to action copy, location, price, or product are easy ways to iterate the same creative pretty simply.
Right. So for the the mom and pop dispensary, owner who maybe wants to run some ads on whatever platform they want. You mentioned CTAs are like a pretty important thing that you need to do, right? You got to tell whoever's looking to do something, right? Just kind of based on your experience on that stuff, what CTAs have you been finding like the most effective? Is it like buy one, get one free? Is it discounts? Is it, viewer menu, something like that?
It goes back to, it really is variant on the market and the brand. We work, we've been public about it because we've done some press releases with them. We work with Sweet Flower in LA, who's super premium in a good way, very branded, and has a brand voice as a retailer. So their messaging doesn't need to be necessarily so cost competitive or value competitive. That might be different in other markets. So to me, there's no one answer there. I like, if you're in a particularly suburban market, shop local messages, community based. If you're competing against a bunch of corporate companies, like maybe we want to come at that a little bit and talk about the community aspect of it. But when you're reaching folks who are going to buy every week anyway, typically it's value, right? Like if I'm buying, I buy an eighth every 2 weeks. I'm slowing down in my older age. But if I'm buying an eighth or a quarter every week, $20 is a difference maker. So maybe we want to just go up the price. If I'm an everyday consumer smoking 3 doobs a day, potency matters because eventually I'm going to need something super strong. So it's all contextualized. And that's why going back to data, and who you're talking to is important.
Right. So on the testing side, because I think one of the biggest advantages that paid advertising strategies have is essentially just testing at scale, right? Like with SEO, it takes a long time, right? You have keywords that, you hope is going to drive the traffic that you want. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then, you're in big trouble. So in terms of the paid strategy, what would be the most, I guess, effective way to leverage the paid strategy in order to do better organically? I'm not just talking about like keywords and stuff like that, but I'm talking about maybe like resonating offers that people can put on their website that has the highest likelihood chance of converting their customer. Is that something that you guys like recommend to your clients? Say, hey, this ad copy worked really, really well. Why don't you give this a shot putting it on your website? Because if it's converting well by paid, it should also do all organic. Or is there a
I would say really where we get into page content is just consistency across brand aesthetics.
Okay.
And if we're promoting an offer and it's not available on the page when you get there, like, hey, use a promo code for 15% off your delivery. Okay, well, if that promo code's not in a floater bar on the page that sticks with you while you browse to the menu, no one's going to claim it. I listen to a ton of podcasts, and I'm a big Tim Dillon fan. Let's say I go to Magic Spoon and I do magicspoon.com/Tim Dillon. That floater is across the page. Make sure you use code Tim at checkout, or otherwise you're going to forget it. And then you have people backtracking, and that makes the process of completing that purchase not seamless, which is counterintuitive to why you paid to drive them there in the first place.
Right. So you increase the friction for your customers, which then reduces conversions. Reducing conversions reduces the cost pretty much.
Yep. And, retargeting is always the sexy one in terms of ROI analysis, particularly when you're just retargeting all site traffic. Like if you're doing your jobs in SEO, you're driving people to the page, we're maybe suppressing everyone who's purchased in the last 24 hours, but everyone else is getting remarketed. That's a lower funnel purchase. We're just driving them back.
Right.
Prospecting traffic, that we can convert on is awesome. Like that person just saw our ad and then completed a purchase. A lot of times we'll look at messaging maybe there or landing page content a little bit more. If we're retargeting, we'll go right back to the menu because we know we saw the page already. You know what we're selling. We just want to get you in a position where you're ready to convert. Right. Prospecting, we're doing a little bit of, we're not doing brand building because everyone says I want sales or you're fired. But like we are telling a story, we are educating them. If you just drop them into a Dutchie menu, which is the logo above it, or a Jane menu, which is the logo above it, it's just like, okay, well, this person doesn't know where you're located, doesn't know your brand value prop. Maybe they're going to bounce and take off.
Right. So hear that, everyone. If you have any sort of promotion or anything like that, and you're linking towards something else, make sure that the messaging is essentially not necessarily identical, but it leads to the exact same thing. So you have something on Instagram that says, hey, you have this promo, go check it out at this URL. Make sure you have the exact same promo on the landing page, because then people are not going to know exactly what's going on, because that continuity is super, super important. So
1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss too. Technically in the Google ad space, you're not allowed to do cannabis at all. But you see locations getting away with it, and I see exactly what they're doing, right? But
it's not hard to figure out. It's just not sustainable. It's a matter of not if, but when you get flagged by the big hand of Google.
Yes, by big G's. So we spoke about a bunch of programmatic ads, spoke about SEO and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on email and SMS in the whole kind of marketing stack of what we have going on?
As a consumer, I hate SMS. Like that's like the last bastion of privacy for me. Like that's my space to message with people I care about. I've been getting hit up by all types of business solicitors recently. So you got me on a particularly grumpy side. I know it's harder to deliver vice messaging. I know that's why everyone's pushing to a loyalty app situation, and which I think will work for some, but not for everybody. Right. I think email is awesome. I know it's not necessarily the most successful for a lot of people, and I don't know if that's because of content or because of deliverability issues and program issues. Right. I've never seen an email newsletter that just got me what I wanted. Like, here's a quick hits, sales this week, new products this week, shop now.
Yeah.
That's really what I think should be in an email. A lot of times it's brand voice, it's brand ethos, and I just don't think once they shop and you give your email, they're looking for coupons, they're looking for savings.
Right.
That's what you should be putting in email.
Right.
SMS, I don't have too strong of an opinion for or against. It works. It's a part of everyone's media mix.
Okay.
I just know that there's a lot of red tape on how you do SMS, with how you're promoting and how you're selling.
Yeah.
And then there's also some challenges at times with attribution measurement, which makes things messy. So I will, long-winded way to say, I'm going to opt out of answering that question.
Well, no, I think you do bring some interesting points. I mean, I've spoken to a bunch of people and kind of asked them the same thing, thoughts on SMS, email, and I forgot exactly who it was, but they're like, I'm not downloading another damn loyalty app at the dispensary I'm going to. That they just said, I don't want any more apps on my phone, right? They have enough, that's about it, right? But then I was speaking to another dispensary owner who was saying email was much better than text, and then another owner that was like, text is like the only thing we're doing, we're cutting out email, right? And I think to your point about how different ad copy works in different places and different CTAs and stuff like that, I do think it's like a regional thing where like just people in this specific demographic probably like, maybe not like, but tolerate this specific kind of thing, right? But I do think that there is another nuance towards email and SMS where like SMS, if you're texting me every single day about a deal, I'm immediately going to block that number, right? But if I give you my email, I'm not saying I want you to send me an email every day, but the overall, I think, consumer demographic tolerance for getting emails every day is a lot higher than getting texts. And I don't think dispensaries are like doing that properly. They're probably just like mass texting because like, hey, your open rates are 90%, but like it's going to continue going down if you keep doing that, right? So that's kind of what I've heard.
Everyone knows there's Spring Big, there's Alpine, there's a bunch of other companies who SMS who do CRM really well. And then I would put email marketing and SMS under the bundle service scope of CRM retention marketing, right? Like it's loyalty marketing. Right. I mean, email is so cheap. It's just like it's a time investment. Build a bunch of templates, create a schedule, send weekly specials on Mondays and on Thursdays going into the weekend. People are going to check that. Like, build a newsletter around sales promotions. It just requires regular upkeep more than a heavy investment in cost. Right. I'm not uber familiar with the cost method for sending SMS. I believe it's a cost per send, whereas email, like we have a Klaviyo account and for our loyalty messaging, and it's $50 a month. Yeah, super cheap. The tools to build templates are right in there. So I don't know. Anybody says we're cutting it out I would just probably contest they're not doing it effectively and regularly. No, yeah, look, I'm with you on that. I mean, like, the marketing channels work. It's about who's executing on those campaigns, right? Just to bring it back to everything, it's just like, company A can use the same tools as company B, but if they're executing it a lot better, then you're at a loss, right? So to break down the entire stack, what would be your recommended kind of stack? Let's just say from, in terms of priority. So what would be like, okay, we got to work on 1 all the way through 10, if that's kind of what you got. Your website, your e-commerce system linked to your point of sale system. Those systems should be easy to navigate with your data. It's your data. We'd be amazed we're doing a lot of things now where we're measuring in-store measurement. So, hey, like, how did online ads affect in-store sales? Not some like jargony or not some like questionable mobile geolocation analysis. Like, hey, this ad had this sale associated to it. And some of the point of sale systems are effing awesome at like working with third parties like us to make these solutions available. Some have been astoundingly bad. So I think that relationship between your e-commerce, your website, there's a whole conversation about iframes versus, a Dutchie Plus or a Jane Roots or a Dispense versus a Dutchie Standard or a Jane Standard. That's a whole separate conversation. Website, CMS, solid e-commerce solution that connects succinctly and easily to your loyalty platform and into your point of sale system.
Right.
Point of sale and loyalty can be related, but typically they're not from what I've seen. From that should be a fairly closed circuit. And then from there, those platforms should be able to support plugins from third parties like myself,
Right.
like other widgets in online paid media channels.
Right.
We plug in mostly through Google Tag Manager or a tag on the page, and then we'll connect to your Dutchie Plus API or Jane API or your Kova API, whatever it is. So as a service provider, it's our job to build the ability to quickly bolt onto their systems.
Yeah.
Those systems, website, e-commerce, point of sale, and loyalty, they need to bolt in with each other very tightly.
Right. So just like your messaging kind of needs to have some continuity, your foundational tech, right, needs to have that continuity as well. I'm very curious. I know we can have a full conversation on this, but the iframe embeds versus kind of like the plus equivalent of all of these online e-commerce menu systems. Which side are you on?
I just don't want the wrong person to see this. Joke aside,
not side, but where are you leaning towards from the eyes of the consumer, not from your side? Like obviously, the more kind of links and SEO and URLs that you can get, sure, like that's.
If you're a scaled operator who's putting a volume of data out,
right,
that asset, your customer list is incredibly valuable.
Right.
When you use some of the other services, you don't own that customer list anymore.
Right.
You share it with them.
Right.
So there's that concern. And then there's also some of the bigger players don't necessarily make data sharing with third parties easy. Some do, some don't. So it's a kind of a scale there. I think they make sense for I just have a website, I need to stand this up. I think that there are answers coming out to compete against those iframe based solutions that are compelling and as simple to execute, which will change the game, or that's the intent of some of these companies. I know that the headless commerce, the pluses of the world, the Jane Roots of the world require a development effort. Like they're not for, I don't have technical resources companies.
Yeah.
So the iframe thing works when you don't, but when the minute you're scaling, you have multiple locations, your online is growing or becoming a bigger part of your business. I would contest that it's the time to start working on those processes of making that site a bit more of your own. I would say you need to understand what your vendors can do with your data, who owns that data. Again, scale matters here. If you have 1,000 customers, just put the iframe up and focus on growing your business. But if you have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 customers,
it's a different conversation.
To me, it's a different conversation. I also come from the data world, so I don't know. I get crotchety about these things.
I mean, look, it makes sense, and I do think that for the even if you own 2 stores, right? Sometimes the effort and the technical know-how and trying to find somebody to implement all of this stuff just well exceeds like the money that you would actually make from implementing this, just because you're so small, right? And as you scale up, I do think it makes a lot more sense, especially if you don't have the tens of thousands of dollars to kind of implement these new solutions. Like I do think that it ends up being more of a headache than not, especially you're kind of grasping at straws at that small level. Like you said, if you have 1,000 customers, it really doesn't matter. But once you're hitting the tens of thousands, then there's a conversation to be had about implementing data, scaling it up, and then, looking at the data from like a more corporate level, I guess, if that's how you want to
it's yes and yes. And as you expand, you want to be acquired,
right.
Like your ability to retain and grow any e-commerce business, cost per acquisition, but lifetime value is massive. And are you potentially deprecating or diminishing rather lifetime value if your customers are being shared? I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but that would be the paranoid way I would look at it.
Yeah. So, hopping back into Safe Reach and stuff like that, super high level. Walk us through okay, I'm a dispensary owner, maybe I own one, how does that conversation look? What do you tell me? And then I'm a dispensary owner with a couple partners and maybe I own 5 to 10. How do those conversations differ? What does that process look like for anyone who's interested?
It's the same thing we want to answer for simplicity. Who do you want to talk to? What do you want to talk to them about? And then how are you validating success, right? Who do you want to talk to is really how big of a footprint around your store? Are there demographics you do well with, not do well with? My mom isn't maybe the ideal profile of a cookie shopper, but she is a profile of a sweet flower shopper, right? So it's like, if I was sweet flower, like, how do I target my mom versus maybe targeting another customer? I'm just throwing brands out that are common brands that just for the sake of conversation. And then how big geographically you want to go about targeting them. What do you want to talk to them about? Why do they give a shit about your offer? Is it convenience? Is it price? Is it product? Going back to the creative things we talked about. So, how big of a geo are we targeting? How are we qualifying these behaviors or demographics? What are we promoting to them? And then how are we validating it works? Which really comes down to, what's your e-commerce system? So does it share the ability for SafeReach to plug in our conversion scripts so that we can measure the effectiveness of media spend? Are you on Leafly versus Jane versus Weedmaps versus Dutchy versus Timber? Because there's different considerations there on all of those things. So it's doing a little bit of a diagnosis there. We've worked with all of them and know what we can or can't do across the board. That's why you work. So whether it's one store or it's 5 stores, that process is pretty much the same, right? We have tools to make that discovery, the quantification of audience availables, pretty easy and scalable. But it's 1 store or 20 stores, the logic is still the same. You have a set radius around the store. There's a finite amount of people in that radius. What the heck do we want to promote to them? And then how are we measuring the effectiveness?
Right. So it's, who do you want to target? What do you want to just kind of put out there? What KPIs are we kind of looking at? And then what is the radius geographically? That's kind of like the 4 main things that you.
Yeah, I would put geo in the who do you want to talk to bundle. Right. Just to keep things nice and simple and 3.
Keep it 3.
Yeah, keep the alliteration going.
Right.
But yes.
Okay, perfect. And then on the attribution side, and then we had a small conversation about this. And again, I don't want to get super technical, but looking at the attribution, one of the big things in the SEO space is like, how do you directly, say that, okay, because I generated you this person to visit your website, how does that turn into a sale? Where do you come in, and how do you ensure that, your ads are properly being given the credit for a sale?
Great question. So the one thing to consider is programmatic ads. We're saying, hey, you're in our radius, you've exhibited cannabis behaviors, so we know you're going to buy cannabis eventually.
Right.
That's the assumption. We're not saying, when you're doing a Google search campaign, that person's saying cannabis now. They're saying, I want to buy, click and buy. Right. So typically there's a click-through conversion because that person's saying, I'm ready to buy. Yep. I saw your ad, I'm going to buy. Programmatic is saying, hey, you look like our customer. We want to track you from the ad exposure to a completed sale, typically 7 days, because we think that's an appropriate timeline.
Right.
What we'll do, this first step is our ads natively, right? We're able to track when and where the ad was served, what ad into what audience, and then if that user completes a purchase within 7 days. Right. Our tags will pull a transaction ID from your point of sale terminal and the revenue amount. That transaction ID allows us to tie our data back to your point of sale system. So we can then understand, did you have a relationship with that customer before? How much did you have a relationship with that customer before? What products did they buy? We built an analytics platform called Nomad that literally connects to point of sale, connects to Jane, Dutchy Plus, Google Analytics to extrapolate that information. But that's essentially how we're tying our data to your data to understand, what did we really do? If I just remarket all of your best customers who are going to buy from you anyway, I look like a marketing god. But the reality is, because people might have bought anyway. Right. So that's the big question we get. How do I know that these people didn't buy from me anyway, Adam? Great question. So that's the first part of answering that question. At the conversion level, what's the relationship you have with these people before? Mm-hmm. We can answer that deterministically in every campaign we do. How do I then take the relationship between an organic search or a Google My Business campaign or a sponsored ad or a Weedmaps campaign, whatever it is? That's where we work with Google Analytics to ingest what their e-commerce framework is saying,
Sure.
to match that against our data in real time to say, hey, our ad server is saying Brandon saw an ad and completed a purchase 3 days later after being prospected.
Right.
Google is showing that same conversion ID as an organic visit.
Right.
So we know that it's consistent with Brandon saw the ad, closed his browser, 2 days later went back and completed a sale.
Right.
If that sale that we have in our data is married to maybe a CPC campaign because they're being bad boys and they're doing Google campaigns, you might want to share that credit or distribute the credit for that attribution. Hey, you didn't sell that whole sale. We actually had to pay another $10 for that click.
Sure.
So really that $10 CPA is actually a $20 CPA on that sale.
Right.
Maybe we want to suppress these people. Maybe we want to not run these ads to these segments. So that's because we're already doing that. Maybe we want to take that money away from CPC. Whatever it is, we can answer all of those questions. I'm trying not to get too down into it.
No,
but
yeah, that's good.
we want to be able to answer what is our system saying, what is your system saying, and where's the overlap.
So super simple. There is a digital ID, it's all private, no one needs to worry about that has specific behaviors of different demographics, right? You match that with the other IDs that the other software is giving you in your POS, and then you put that together, and then boom, you have this data piece that says, hey, this person did that.
That's a very succinct way of putting it, yes.
I just want to make it as simple as possible because I know people listening to this are like, yeah, I don't know.
When you work with us, you want to log into one screen and say, here's what we spent, here's what we sold, here's a new customer, here's a new returning customer, and then here's where those customers also engaged your brand on the path to conversion. We can answer that. You don't have to do the programming. You don't have to do the tech configuration. We know the questions that dispensary owners ask of their digital partners, and we built a solution that is hyper scalable and solves all those problems.
Fantastic. There's something that you mentioned. So the initial question about that marketing tech stack, programmatic, SEO, SMS, MMS, loyalty, that fun stuff. I noticed that you didn't have what a lot of dispensaries are doing, which is like Weedmaps and Leafly advertising, right? But you did kind of mention it in passing, which is why I brought it up. Is there a reason why that's kind of not one of your main things, using these kind of main directories anymore?
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I think it's finding the right balance of what's appropriate for your market and your brand. It's a common theme in everything we're saying. There's commonalities in strategies that work, but the method and degree of which they're applied at the individual brand level does vary. That's where your marketing analysis comes in.
Right.
Some of these providers are selling competitive products to me because their first-party products aren't necessarily satiating what the market wants in terms of measurable engagement.
Sure.
I know some of these platforms win advertising dollars purely out of FOMO, and they're not cheap advertising dollars. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. What I would say is don't let a salesperson sell you. Challenge that salesperson to say, hey, I want to test small, then I want to test big, and I want to see what the difference is. Because somewhere in there is probably the right blend of spend for you. Yes,
agreed. Like, I mean, it's East Coast, West Coast, client on the East Coast, and Weedmaps pitch them whatever, $4,000 a month or whatever it is, like very minimal engagement, nothing at all. I have another client out in Montana where they said it themselves that market is still kind of catching up, and the majority of people who they get is from Weedmaps, right? So again, it's from the start of our conversation, it's ROI, right? How much am I paying? How much money am I getting back? And yeah, I was just super interested to kind of hear what your thought process was on both those platforms as well.
I also haven't seen a lot of their attribution solutions. I know Weedmaps recently acquired a company that has had a similar business model to what we do. They did some things very different that they were better at and were their core competencies, and I would contest that we were significantly better at the things that they were doing that we do really well.
Right.
So I imagine that Weedmaps is going to transform into an advertising business, for the cannabis space, amongst other things they're doing. I'm not going to pretend to know their business.
Yeah.
They have a lot of money, so my assumption is they should be able to solve the problems that
They
people are
should.
complaining about.
They
But TBD.
time will tell, right? So now getting to, I guess, the last little bit of the episode, just want to say, thanks again for a really awesome conversation. This has been going swimmingly. What would you say to an owner of a dispensary who's like looking to take their company to the next level?
I know one digital marketing campaign is going to solve it. There needs to be synergy across your marketing messaging, outdoor, in-store, online. You need to have a great customer experience, because I don't care how good your deals are. If I hate coming to your dispensary because your bud tenders suck, they're rude or they're slow or the flower sucks.
Right.
I'm a flower smoker. I'm not coming back. Yes. So you need to obviously have a great shopper experience. And then you need to be thinking about how you retain and how you keep customers separately, and how those things work together. These are all very high level, things that typically one person on a staff would handle explicitly.
Right.
But that's really customer service first, discoverability online, ease of transaction online, and then ability to keep people finding you, and ability to keep the ones who do find you coming back.
Right.
Understanding why it is they come back, and then arbitraging the crap out of that.
Right. So, the buyer shopper experience, retaining, keeping customers, the discoverability of your own store, again, and these kind of all tie into the stuff that you were saying, right? It's like, you got to have the good buyer shopper experience. So you got to make sure your store is, done well. You got to hire the good bud tenders and good people to do that. To retain and keep customers, you got to have the good product. And again, just a good buying experience itself, discoverability, whether it's with SEO stuff or it's safe reach, you got to make sure people can find you and then keep finding you. And I do think that if you cover these bases, you're in a pretty good spot. You're doing better than most anyways.
Agreed. Like, you got a good product, you have to be price competitive, and that's really driven by the market. But people have to like to shop with you. They have to feel comfortable. Like, I think retail is getting slick. I think some people some people don't care if it's a head shop looking shop. Like, I'm here to buy a bud. Like, I'm a regular smoker, but like my mom isn't going to go into a seedy looking, like, bong shop looking place to go buy bud. So It's knowing your market, and then going back to the mechanics, great customer experience, inflow of customers, retention of customers.
Right. Perfect. And then any last additional nuggets of wisdom, just in general, maybe for other entrepreneurs out there, that you'd like to share?
Work your ass off, believe in yourself, even when nobody else does. Right. That's a little too rah.
It's true though. I think that if anyone was to take anything out of this conversation, it's about looking at the foundational aspects of the business and just doing it very, very well, right? It's not just about, hey, have a good website. It's like, okay, actually have a good website, right? Or actually have a good buyer experience, because we didn't list too many things, right? There's like 4 or 5 things that if you do well, you're going to be really successful, right? And I think that applies for business owners as a whole. Like, you got to work hard. That's one of the tenets of, kind of making a successful business, right?
Yeah, it's anybody in the cannabis business, you have your money right, because we're an ad business, right? Like, and we are 3 years profitable and growing, and just going to get a traditional loan to fund and manage receivables was a freaking nightmare. So I would just say, you're entering the cannabis industry, be aware, be ready for entrepreneurial challenges and then some, and work with smart people, or you get a mentor, someone you trust. Like, I don't know, I'm very comfortable saying, I need help. That doesn't scare me. So I'm very lucky. I have people in my life who I can call, who have been very successful in corporate world and in entrepreneurial world, who act as, mentors to me and help me navigate that issue. Whatever it is I'm trying, whether it's staffing, whether it's financial, whether it's just, personal at times.
Hey,
But yeah,
personal is
man.
part of it. Personal is part of it. I mean, a lot of people are like, yeah, business, business, business. But if you don't have your personal life handled, then, your head's a wreck, then, nothing else is going to work out well. But yeah,
Well, the idea of 50-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks is like, it's easy to say, it's much harder to do in perpetuity.
right. You can do it for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, but eventually there's going to hit that mark where you're like, I'm done. Right. So as well, playing the long-term game, expanding that time horizon, and kind of getting success off of the patients, which I think is super, super important. So last things last, where can people get in touch if they want to find you? Feel free to plug all the different things that you'd like to plug about SafeReach.
SafeReach.com. It's SAFE- or hyphen REACH.com. My email is ADAM @safe- or -reach.com. LinkedIn, SafeReach, Instagram, SafeReach, shoot us a DM. We're pretty much at most of major industry events. Sometimes we usually sponsor a big party at MJ BizCon, but you usually see me and a few of my peers bopping around. But feel free to shoot me a DM. Feel free to shoot me a message or a connection. This is the Adam you're going to get, whether you're a prospect, whether you're a small prospect or a large prospect. We want to be in business with people who want to speak directly and candidly and against a shared common goal set. So that's the way we do business, and we found it to work, and we look forward to working with you guys.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thanks again for hopping on the show. This is the end of the Dispensary Marketing Podcast episode. Again, I'm your host, Brandon Kwan, founder of Cannabis Marketing. If you're a dispensary, you need any help with any of your marketing stuff, just hit me up. Just go to my website, cannabismarketing.com, and I'll see you over there. Thanks again. Bye.